The clatter of plates and the hiss of the espresso machine blended into the chaotic symphony I'd grown accustomed to at Bellini's. 6 months into this job, and my feet had memorized the cracked pattern of the ceramic tiles beneath them. I tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear, feeling the sticky residue of sweat at my temples. My double shift was entering hour 14, and the weight of exhaustion pressed down on my shoulders like an unwelcome embrace. "Order up for table 7, Sophia!" Marco shouted from the kitchen, his voice barely cutting through the din of the Friday night rush. I balanced the tray against my hip, the way I'd learned after countless spills, and navigated the maze of tables. The smell of garlic and red wine sauce clung to my uniform, a scent that would follow me home to my empty studio apartment. Bellini's wasn't much, but it paid just enough to keep the lights on and my student loans at bay. One more year of night classes, and I might finally finish my nursing degree. That thought alone kept me upright on nights like these. "Excuse me, miss? Could I get more water?" A middle-aged man in a business suit gestured at me impatiently, not bothering to look up from his phone. "Right away, sir," I replied, my customer service voice so practiced it felt like it belonged to someone else. I delivered the steaming plates to table 7, a young couple so absorbed in each other they barely acknowledged my existence. Their happiness felt like something viewed through a fogged window, visible, but untouchable. At 27, I'd almost convinced myself I didn't need that kind of connection anymore. Almost. The front door chimed, and I glanced up reflexively. In the dimly lit entrance stood 3 men, their presence immediately altering the atmosphere of the restaurant. The first 2 were tall and broad-shouldered, their eyes scanning the room with mechanical precision. Security. I'd worked in enough upscale restaurants in this city to recognize the look. But it was the third man who stole the oxygen from the room. He stood slightly shorter than his companions, dressed in a charcoal suit that had been tailored to embrace every contour of his frame. His dark hair, salted with gray at the temples, was swept back to reveal a face that seemed carved from something harder than flesh. Sharp cheekbones, a jawline that could cut glass, but it was his eyes that caused my tray to slip slightly in my grip. Deep set and the color of aged whiskey, they moved deliberately across the restaurant as if taking inventory of all he surveyed. Something about him reminded me of the panthers I'd seen at the zoo as a child. Beautiful, but with danger simmering just beneath the surface. "Sophia," Marco hissed from behind me. "That's Vincent Moretti, corner table. Now." My heart stuttered. Everyone in the city knew the Moretti name, though most pretended not to. They owned half the waterfront, several construction companies, and according to whispers, most of the city officials. The legitimate businesses were just the surface. What lurked beneath was the stuff of local legend. I nodded mutely and watched as the host led the 3 men to our most secluded corner table. As I approached with water glasses, I noticed something I hadn't seen before, a small figure trailing behind Moretti. A little girl, no more than 6 or 7, with dark curls cascading down her back, and a blue velvet dress that looked like it cost more than my monthly rent. "Good evening, gentlemen," I said, setting down the water glasses with hands I forced not to tremble. "I'm Sophia. I'll be your server tonight." The 2 security men didn't acknowledge me. Moretti's gaze lifted slowly, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made me feel exposed, as if he could read every struggle, every fear, every dream I'd tucked away. "Sophia," he repeated, the Italian pronunciation of my name rolling off his tongue like velvet. Not a question. Not quite a greeting. Something in between. "It's actually Sophia," I corrected before I could stop myself, immediately regretting it as his eyebrow arched slightly. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. "My daughter's name is Sophia as well." He gestured to the little girl who was climbing into the booth beside him. A beautiful name. The little girl looked up at me with eyes identical to her father's, though hers held a childlike innocence his had long ago shed. "Where's the bread?" "Mama always asks for bread first," she declared, with the confidence of someone used to being indulged. A flash of something, pain, anger, crossed Moretti's face so quickly I might have imagined it. "Sophia," he said gently, his voice taking on a softness I wouldn't have thought possible. "Remember what we discussed?" The girl's lower lip trembled slightly, but she nodded and looked down at her lap. I seized the opportunity to retreat. I'll bring some bread right away and give you a few minutes with the menus. As I hurried back to the kitchen, I felt Moretti's gaze following me, as tangible as a hand against my back. The weight of it made me stumble slightly as I pushed through the swinging door. "You okay?" Lena, the other waitress on shift, asked as she loaded her tray. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Table 12 is Vincent Moretti," I whispered, grabbing a bread basket and filling it with focaccia still warm from the oven. Lena's eyes widened. "The Vincent Moretti? Jesus, Sophia. Be careful with that one. My cousin worked an event at his house once. Said the basement was off limits, and when someone wandered down there by mistake, they never came back to work the next day." "That's just a rumor," I said, though uncertainty threaded through my voice. "Everything about that family is rumors, until it isn't," Lena replied darkly. "Just keep your head down, do your job, and don't make eye contact. Too late for that." I returned to the table with the bread basket and a small dish of olive oil. The little girl, Sophia, brightened immediately. "Can I have butter instead?" she asked, looking up at me with those disarming eyes. "Sophia," her father said, a gentle warning in his tone. "It's no problem at all," I assured him, then turned to the child. "I like butter better too. It'll be our secret." The girl smiled, a gap in her front teeth making her look even younger. As I placed the bread before her, she tugged at the sleeve of my uniform. "When is Mama coming?" she asked innocently. "She's late again." The temperature at the table seemed to drop 10 degrees. The two security men exchanged glances, and Moretti's hand tightened almost imperceptibly around his water glass. "Sophia, enough," he said, his voice low but commanding. "Mama isn't joining us tonight. We've discussed this." The girl's eyes filled with tears, but she bit her lip and nodded, reaching for a piece of bread. I stood frozen, trapped in a moment I had clearly blundered into. Family drama was common in restaurants, couples fighting, teenagers sulking, parents disciplining, but this felt different, dangerous. "I'll get that butter," I said quickly, desperate to escape the tension. As I walked away, I heard the little girl's voice again, quieter now. "But you said Mama was going on a long trip. It's been so long. When is she coming back?" I didn't hear Moretti's response, but something in my chest ached for the child. Working at Bellini's, I'd become adept at reading the stories behind the faces that came and went. The little girl's mother was gone, whether by choice, circumstance, or something darker, I couldn't tell. But the absence had left a wound still raw enough that the child couldn't stop pressing on it. The rest of their meal progressed without incident. I kept their water glasses filled, brought the child her butter, and took their orders with professional detachment. Moretti ordered for all of them, linguine with clams for himself, spaghetti with butter and cheese for his daughter, and nothing for the security men, who remained vigilant, their eyes constantly sweeping the restaurant. I noticed that Moretti barely touched his phone, unusual in a restaurant where most diners seem physically attached to their screens. Instead, his attention alternated between his daughter, whom he watched with a fierce protectiveness, and the restaurant around them. Occasionally, his gaze would find me, lingering just long enough to send a flush creeping up my neck before I forced myself to look away. When I brought their dessert, tiramisu for him, gelato for the child, Sophia looked up at me with those devastating eyes. "Do you have a mama?" she asked suddenly. "Sophia," her father admonished, but his voice lacked its earlier edge. "It's okay," I said, surprising myself. Something about the girl's naked vulnerability disarmed me. "Yes, I do. She lives far away, though, in Arizona." "Do you miss her?" the girl pressed, scooping a spoonful of chocolate gelato into her mouth. I hesitated, aware of Moretti's eyes on me. "Every day, but we talk on the phone, and I visit when I can." "I miss my mama too," Sophia said matter-of-factly, chocolate smeared at the corner of her mouth. "Papa says she had to go away, but I think she's hiding, like in hide and seek." Moretti's jaw tightened, and I saw his hand move to cover his daughter's smaller one. "Sophia, remember what Dr. Brennan said about these conversations?" The little girl's shoulders slumped. "That it's okay to feel sad, but Mama isn't coming back, and it's not a game." My heart squeezed painfully in my chest. Before I could stop myself, I knelt down to the girl's eye level. "Sometimes the people we love can't be with us, even when they want to be. But that doesn't mean they don't love you very much." I realized my mistake immediately. It wasn't my place to comfort this child, to speak about something I knew nothing about. I glanced up to find Moretti watching me with an unreadable expression. "I'm sorry," I said quickly, standing up straight. "I shouldn't have—" "She just wants to be loved," I whispered, the words escaping before I could catch them. "Like we all do." A deafening silence fell over the table. The security men shifted uncomfortably. Sophia looked at me with wide, curious eyes. And Moretti studied me as if seeing me for the first time, something calculating and dangerous and somehow wounded behind his gaze. "The check, please," he said finally, his voice so low I had to lean in slightly to hear him. I nodded and retreated, my face burning with embarrassment. I had crossed a line, inserted myself into a family dynamic I had no business commenting on. Worse, I had done it with Vincent Moretti, a man who, if the rumors were true, had people taken care of for much smaller transgressions. When I returned with the check, Moretti handed me a credit card without looking at the total. As I processed the payment, my hands trembled slightly. The tip line on the receipt had been filled in with a number so large I had to read it twice to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. It was more than I made in 2 weeks. "Sir, I think there's been a mistake with the tip," I said when I brought back his receipt and card. Moretti stood, helping his daughter out of the booth. He was taller than I had realized, his presence somehow filling more space than his physical form. "There's no mistake, Sophia," he said, buttoning his suit jacket with one hand while keeping the other protectively on his daughter's shoulder. "My Sophia has taken a liking to you. She doesn't do that often." The little girl looked up at me and smiled shyly. "Will you be here tomorrow? Papa said we can come back for lunch." I glanced between the child and her father, unsure how to respond. Yes, I'll be working the lunch shift tomorrow." Moretti nodded once, a decisive gesture. "Until tomorrow, then." As they walked toward the door, Sophia turned and waved at me. I waved back automatically, a sense of foreboding mixing with something else I couldn't name, something warm and dangerous and entirely unexpected. It wasn't until they had gone, the door chiming softly behind them, that I realized my catastrophic error. In my exhaustion, in my moment of unguarded empathy for the child, I had inadvertently entangled myself with a man whose world operated on rules I couldn't begin to understand, a man whose very name was whispered in this city. I stared down at the receipt in my hand, at the exorbitant tip that now felt less like generosity and more like a down payment on something I hadn't agreed to sell. "What happened over there?" Lena asked, appearing beside me. "Moretti actually smiled at you. I've never seen him smile. I made a mistake," I said quietly, folding the receipt and sliding it into my apron pocket. "I talked to his daughter about her mother." Lena's sharp intake of breath confirmed what I already knew. "Sophia? Everyone knows Mrs. Moretti disappeared 3 years ago. Some say she ran off with his money. Others say," she trailed off, lowering her voice. "Well, you can imagine the alternatives." I closed my eyes briefly, the weight of exhaustion suddenly crushing. "And I just agreed to serve them again tomorrow." "Be careful," Lena warned, squeezing my arm. "Men like Moretti don't notice women like us unless they want something. And trust me, you don't want to be wanted by Vincent Moretti." As I finished my shift, wiping down tables and counting my meager tips, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in my life's trajectory, like a train that had been imperceptibly rerouted, destined now for a station I'd never intended to visit. Outside, the night air bit at my skin as I wrapped my thin jacket tighter around myself. The bus stop was 3 blocks away, and the streets were quiet except for the distant wail of sirens. As I walked, I glanced over my shoulder more than once, unable to shake the sensation of being watched, of whiskey-colored eyes following my every move. Sleep eluded me that night, my mind replaying the encounter with Vincent Moretti and his daughter like a film stuck on loop. Their faces, so similar yet worlds apart, haunted my thoughts. The child's innocent questions about her mother, the father's barely concealed pain, and my own foolish intrusion into their private grief. By morning, exhaustion had settled deep in my bones, but I dragged myself out of bed anyway. My tiny apartment was cold. The heating in this old building was unpredictable at best. and I shivered as I stepped into the shower. The hot water ran out after 3 minutes, another daily reminder of all I couldn't afford. As I dressed for my shift, I considered calling in sick. The prospect of facing Moretti again sent anxiety spiraling through my chest. But I needed the money too desperately to forfeit a day's wages, especially with rent due next week. Besides, there was a chance they wouldn't show up. Men like Moretti made casual promises all the time, especially to placate children. Surely he had more important matters than keeping a lunch date at a modest Italian restaurant with an ordinary waitress who had spoken out of turn. The morning rush at Bellini's was lighter than usual, just a few business people grabbing coffee and pastries. I moved through my tasks mechanically, my thoughts elsewhere. Marco noticed my distraction as I nearly collided with him coming out of the kitchen. "You look like hell," he said bluntly, steadying me with a hand on my arm. "Everything okay?" I forced a smile. "Just tired. Didn't sleep well." He studied me for a moment, then sighed. "Take your break early. You're no good to me like this." I nodded gratefully and retreated to the small break room, collapsing onto the worn couch. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Another request for money I didn't have. I tucked it away without responding, guilt gnawing at me. She'd supported me through so much. Now that she needed help, I could barely keep myself afloat, let alone assist her. My 15 minutes of respite ended too quickly. When I returned to the floor, Lena grabbed my wrist, her eyes wide. "They're here," she whispered urgently. "Corner table again. Asked for you specifically." My stomach dropped. I turned slowly to see Vincent Moretti seated at the same table as yesterday, his daughter beside him. Today, only one security man accompanied them, standing unobtrusively near the entrance rather than sitting at their table. Moretti looked different in daylight. No less dangerous, but somehow more human. He'd forgone a tie, and his crisp white shirt was open at the collar, revealing a glimpse of tanned skin. Sophia wore a green dress today, her dark curls held back by a matching headband. She spotted me first, her face lighting up with recognition. I took a deep breath and approached their table, professional smile firmly in place. "Good afternoon. It's nice to see you both again." "Sophia," Sophia exclaimed, bouncing slightly in her seat. "I told Papa you'd be here. He said maybe you had the day off, but I knew you'd come." Moretti's eyes met mine, that same intensity from yesterday making my skin prickle with awareness. "My daughter was quite insistent we return today." I nodded, unsure how to respond. "Can I get you something to drink? Apple juice?" Sophia declared. "Still water for me," Moretti added, his voice low and measured. Then, unexpectedly, "Did you sleep well, Sophia?" The question caught me off guard, its casualness at odds with the calculating look in his eyes. Yes, thank you," I lied, suddenly conscious of the concealer I'd hastily applied to the shadows beneath my eyes. Something like amusement flickered across his features. "You're not a convincing liar. Admirable in some ways, dangerous in others." I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "I'll get those drinks." As I walked away, I could feel his gaze tracking me. The weight of his attention felt both intrusive and strangely thrilling, a contradiction that unsettled me. At the bar, I took a moment to compose myself, filling Sophia's juice glass with shaking hands. "Everything okay?" Antonio, our bartender, asked with concern. "Fine," I assured him, though nothing felt fine at all. When I returned to their table, Sophia was coloring on a placemat, her small tongue poking out between her teeth in concentration. Moretti was watching her with an expression I hadn't seen before, naked tenderness that transformed his severe features into something almost gentle. "Your drinks," I announced, setting them down carefully. "Are you ready to order?" Sophia looked up from her drawing. "I want spaghetti again, and can I have extra cheese?" Moretti smiled indulgently at his daughter before turning to me. "The chef's special for me, and yes, extra cheese for the little artist here." I nodded and turned to leave, but Sophia's voice stopped me. "I made this for you," she said, holding up her drawing. It was a childish rendition of 3 figures, a tall man in black, a small girl in green, and a woman with long hair. "It's you and me and Papa at the restaurant." "Sophia," Moretti said, a note of warning in his voice. The little girl's face fell slightly, but she persisted. "Can she sit with us, Papa? Just for a minute? Please?" I froze. caught between Moretti's darkening expression and his daughter's hopeful one. The restaurant wasn't busy. There were only 3 other occupied tables, but sitting down with customers was strictly against policy. "Your father is right, Sophia," I said gently. "I'm working right now, but thank you for the beautiful drawing. I'll keep it safe." Sophia's lower lip trembled dangerously. Moretti sighed, a sound of measured restraint rather than exasperation. "Perhaps Sophia can join us briefly when she's on her break," he suggested, his eyes never leaving my face. Not a request. A command softened only for his daughter's benefit. I have a break in about an hour," I found myself saying. Sophia beamed triumphantly. Moretti merely nodded, as if my compliance had been a foregone conclusion. I escaped to the kitchen, clutching Sophia's drawing and trying to calm my racing heart. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Marco commented as I handed him their order. "Worse," I muttered. "I just agreed to sit with Vincent Moretti on my break." Marco's eyes widened. "Are you insane? Men like that don't take friendly interest in waitresses, Sophia. They want something." "It's for his daughter," I explained weakly. "She's just a child. She seems lonely." Marco shook his head. "Children are the perfect cover. Be careful." I nodded, though I wasn't sure what exactly I was supposed to be careful of. Surely Moretti wouldn't try anything in a public restaurant, with his own daughter present. Still, Marco's warning echoed Lena's from the night before, amplifying the sense of foreboding that had taken up residence in my chest. The hour passed too quickly. I served other tables, refilled drinks, and all the while felt the magnetic pull of Moretti's presence in the corner of the restaurant. Several times I caught him watching me, his gaze inscrutable but unwavering. When my break finally arrived, I hesitated by the kitchen door, briefly considering hiding until my 15 minutes were up. But something, curiosity perhaps, or a misplaced sense of obligation to the little girl, propelled me forward. "You came!" Sophia exclaimed as I approached their table. She had finished her spaghetti, evidence of it lingering in a smear of sauce at the corner of her mouth. Moretti gestured to the empty chair across from them. "Sit, please." I sat, folding my hands in my lap to hide their trembling. Up close, I could see the fine details I'd missed before. The slight crookedness of Moretti's nose, suggesting it had been broken at least once, and a thin scar that bisected his right eyebrow. Signs of violence etched into an otherwise immaculate presentation. "Sophia was just telling me about her ballet lesson this morning," Moretti said, his voice surprisingly conversational. The little girl nodded eagerly. "I'm learning to pirouette. Do you dance, Sophia?" "I used to," I admitted, smiling despite my nervousness. "A long time ago when I was about your age." "Why did you stop?" Sophia asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. The question was innocent but touched a nerve. Memories of lessons abruptly ended when money grew tight, dreams shelved out of necessity rather than choice. Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices, I answered carefully. Dancing was wonderful, but I needed to focus on other things. Moretti's eyes narrowed slightly, as if he'd detected the subtext beneath my words. "What are you focusing on now, Sophia? Besides serving excellent linguine, of course." The question felt loaded, as if he were probing for information rather than making small talk. I hesitated, then decided simple truth was safest. "I'm studying nursing, part-time while I work here. A healer," he mused, something unidentifiable flickering in his eyes. "Interesting choice." Sophia bounced in her seat. "Like when Papa hurt his hand and the nurse gave him the special bandage? Do you make special bandages, too?" A shadow crossed Moretti's face. "Sophia," he said quietly, and though his tone remained gentle, the warning was clear. I pretended not to notice the exchange, though my mind raced with questions. What happened to his hand, and why was it a forbidden topic? "Not yet," I told Sophia. "I'm still learning. It takes a long time to become a good nurse." "Papa says anything worth doing takes time," she recited proudly. Then her expression turned solemn, like waiting for Mama. The air at the table suddenly thickened. Moretti's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, I instinctively changed the subject. "Do you have a favorite ballet, Sophia?" I asked quickly. The diversion worked. The little girl launched into an elaborate description of Swan Lake, complete with dramatic arm movements that nearly knocked over her water glass. Moretti reached out to steady it, his fingers brushing against mine as I moved to do the same. The brief contact sent an electric current up my arm, and I withdrew my hand as if burned. Our eyes met, and for a moment, something charged and dangerous passed between us. Then Sophia's voice broke the spell, pulling my attention back to her story about princesses and swans. My break ended too soon. As I stood to leave, Sophia grabbed my hand. "Will you be here tomorrow?" she asked, hope shining in her eyes. Before I could respond, Moretti interjected. "Unfortunately, we have other plans tomorrow, Tesoro." He turned to me, expression unreadable. "But perhaps you could join us for dinner at my home this weekend, Sunday. Sophia would enjoy the company, and my chef makes an excellent ossobuco." The invitation landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of alarm through my body. Dinner at his home? It was wildly inappropriate, completely beyond the bounds of our brief acquaintance. I don't think," I stammered. "Please, Sophia," Sophia pleaded, her small face earnest. "I could show you my ballet shoes and my dollhouse and the kittens in the garden." I looked from the child to her father, trapped. Refusing felt impossible with Sophia's hopeful eyes fixed on me. Yet accepting seemed dangerous in ways I couldn't fully articulate. "I have Sunday off," I heard myself say, the words emerging without my permission. Moretti nodded, satisfied. "Good. My driver will collect you at 6. Where do you live?" The question jolted me back to reality. "Wait, I didn't—" 197 Eastwood Avenue, apartment 3B, he stated. Not a question, but a confirmation. A chill ran through me. He already knew my address. Of course he did. "How did you—" "I make it my business to know things, Sophia," he said quietly, his voice pitched so Sophia couldn't hear, especially about people who interest me. The implication hung in the air between us, thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. I swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how out of my depth I truly was. "I should get back to work," I murmured. Moretti inclined his head in acknowledgement. "Until Sunday, then." As I walked away, Sophia called after me, "Bring your appetite. Papa's chef makes the best desserts, too." Her childish enthusiasm contrasted sharply with the calculated intensity of her father's gaze, which I could feel following me across the restaurant. I returned to work in a daze, moving through the motions automatically while my mind raced. What had I just agreed to? And more importantly, what would happen if I changed my mind? Sunday arrived with the inevitability of an approaching storm. I spent the morning in a state of nervous agitation, alternating between determined plans to cancel and resigned acceptance of my fate. 3 times I picked up my phone to call Bellini's, knowing Marco could get a message to Moretti. 3 times I set it down again, remembering the fact that Vincent Moretti already knew my address. Had known it before I'd ever agreed to this dinner. What else did he know about me? My schedule? My finances? The thought sent a chill through me. By late afternoon, I stood before my closet, staring at the pitiful selection of clothing appropriate for dinner, at what I imagined was a mansion. Nothing seemed right. Everything I owned screamed, struggling waitress, because that's exactly what I was. I finally settled on a simple navy blue dress I'd worn to a friend's wedding last year. It was modest enough to be appropriate for a dinner with a child present, but still flattering. I paired it with my only decent pair of heels and the silver earrings my mother had given me for my 25th birthday. Looking in the mirror, I hardly recognized myself without the Bellini's uniform I'd grown so accustomed to seeing. At exactly 5:45, a knock sounded at my door. I jumped, my heart racing. He'd said 6 o'clock. Why would someone be here already? When I opened the door, I found myself face to face with one of Moretti's security men, the taller one from the first night at the restaurant. Up close, the scar along his jawline was more pronounced, a jagged line that disappeared beneath his collar. "Miss Sophia," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle for someone so imposing. "Mr. Moretti sent me to escort you." He said 6 o'clock, I replied, clutching my small purse like a shield. The man's expression didn't change. "Mr. Moretti prefers punctuality. The car is waiting." I hesitated, suddenly aware of how easily I could close the door, refuse to go. But something told me that option had evaporated the moment I'd engaged with Sophia's innocent questions days ago. "Let me get my coat," I said, turning back into my apartment. The drive was silent and tense. The security man, who introduced himself only as Dante, sat in the front beside the driver, leaving me alone in the spacious back seat of the black SUV. The windows were tinted so darkly I could barely make out the streets as we left my neighborhood behind and headed toward the hills that overlooked the city. After 30 minutes of winding roads that took us higher into the exclusive neighborhoods I'd only ever seen in magazine features, the car slowed before an imposing gate. A security camera swiveled toward us, and after a moment, the gate swung open silently. We proceeded up a long driveway lined with perfectly manicured trees until the house, no, estate, came into view. Moretti's home was a sprawling stone mansion that seemed to grow organically from the hillside, its windows gleaming like eyes in the early evening light. A fountain bubbled in the circular driveway, the water catching the golden rays of the setting sun. It was beautiful, intimidating, and utterly alien to my world. Dante opened my door and offered his hand to help me out. His palm was calloused, his grip firm but careful, as if he was accustomed to managing his own strength. "This way, miss," he directed, leading me up wide stone steps to a massive front door that opened before we reached it. A woman in her 60s with silver-streaked dark hair and a crisp black dress nodded at me. "Miss Sophia, welcome to the Moretti residence. I'm Mrs. Russo, the housekeeper. Please come in." The foyer was a study in restrained opulence. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, and a crystal chandelier that scattered light like diamonds. I fought the urge to kick off my heels, suddenly conscious of how the click of each step echoed in the vast space. "Sophia!" Sophia's voice rang out, followed by the pattering of small feet. She appeared at the top of a grand staircase, still in her ballet clothes, a pink leotard and tutu, her hair escaping from what had once been a neat bun. "You came. Papa said you might change your mind." Before I could respond, she flew down the stairs and wrapped her arms around my waist. The unexpected affection startled me, but I returned the hug, oddly touched by her enthusiasm. "Sophia," a voice called from above. "What did we discuss about running in the house?" Vincent Moretti descended the staircase with unhurried grace, each step deliberate. Unlike at the restaurant, where his presence had been commanding but contained, here he seemed to expand, filling the space with an authority that came from absolute ownership. He wore charcoal slacks and a crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled to reveal strong forearms, more casual than I'd seen him before, yet somehow no less intimidating. "But Papa, Sophia's here," Sophia protested, still clinging to me. Moretti's eyes met mine over his daughter's head. "So, I see. Welcome to our home, Sophia." There was something in the way he said, "our home," that sent a shiver down my spine. A subtle emphasis that suggested territories and boundaries I was only beginning to comprehend. "Thank you for inviting me," I replied. Grateful, my voice remained steady. "Sophia, go change for dinner," he instructed his daughter. "Maria is waiting to help you." The little girl pouted but released me. "Will you see my room later, Sophia? And meet my kittens?" "If your father says it's all right," I answered carefully. Sophia beamed and raced back up the stairs, apparently exempt from the no-running rule when retreating. Once she was gone, the atmosphere shifted. Moretti stepped closer, close enough that I could detect the subtle scent of his cologne, something woodsy and expensive. "You look lovely," he said, his eyes conducting a slow inventory of my appearance. "That color suits you. Thank you," I murmured, fighting the urge to fidget under his scrutiny. He gestured toward an archway to our right. "Would you care for a drink before dinner? We have some time while Sophia changes." It wasn't really a question. I nodded and followed him into a room that could have been plucked from an old Hollywood film. Rich leather furniture, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and a bar that gleamed with crystal decanters. A fire crackled in a stone hearth larger than my entire bathroom. "What's your preference?" he asked, moving behind the bar with practiced ease. "Just water, please." Alcohol seemed dangerous in this situation, where I already felt off balance. A faint smile curved his lips. Cautious, wise. He poured water into a crystal glass for me and what looked like whiskey for himself. As he handed me the glass, his fingers brushed mine deliberately, lingering a second longer than necessary. The contact sent a jolt through me that I struggled to disguise. "Please sit," he said, indicating a leather armchair near the fire. I perched on the edge of the seat, too tense to relax into its embrace. Moretti took the chair opposite, his posture relaxed yet alert, like a predator at rest. "You're nervous," he observed, taking a sip of his drink. "Why?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. This isn't exactly a normal Sunday evening for me." "And what would constitute normal for you, Sophia?" he asked, my name once again taking on that Italian inflection in his mouth. I shrugged slightly. "Studying. Maybe watching a movie. Nothing like this." "Nothing like what, exactly?" His questions felt like a chess match where I didn't know the rules. "Nothing like having dinner at a mansion with a man I barely know." Something darkened in his expression. "You know Sophia enjoys your company. That should be reason enough." "Is it?" I asked before I could stop myself. "Is that really why I'm here?" Moretti leaned forward slightly, the firelight casting shadows across the planes of his face. "You interest me, Sophia. You speak to my daughter about her mother with more compassion and insight than any of the therapists we've seen. You correct my pronunciation of your name without fear. You live in one of the poorest neighborhoods in the city, yet carry yourself with dignity. Yes, you interest me." His words should have frightened me. Instead, I felt a dangerous thrill at being the focus of such intense attention. "I'm not very interesting," I said quietly. "Just ordinary." "There is nothing ordinary about you," he replied, his voice dropping lower. "I recognize exceptional things when I see them. It's a skill that has served me well." Before I could respond, Sophia burst into the room, now dressed in a green velvet dress, similar to the one she'd worn at the restaurant. Her hair had been tamed into a neater bun, though wisps still escaped around her face. "Papa, Maria says dinner is ready. Can Sophia sit next to me?" The intimate tension that had been building shattered. Moretti stood, setting his glass aside. "Of course, Tesoro. Shall we?" The dining room was as impressive as the rest of the house. A long table that could seat 20, crystal chandelier, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights below. Only one end of the table was set, 3 places clustered together intimately, despite the room's grandeur. Sophia claimed the seat at her father's right and patted the chair beside her for me. I sat, noticing the heavy silver and fine china with mounting discomfort. Even the water glasses probably cost more than my entire set of dishes. A man in chef's whites appeared briefly to announce the menu, something elaborate involving truffles and ingredients I couldn't pronounce, before retreating to the kitchen. Mrs. Russo and a younger woman served the courses with silent efficiency. Throughout the meal, Sophia dominated the conversation, jumping between topics with childish enthusiasm. Her ballet class, her kittens, a book her teacher was reading to her class. Moretti watched her with undisguised affection, his severe features softening whenever she spoke directly to him. I observed their interaction with growing curiosity. For all the rumors about Vincent Moretti, the whispered stories of ruthlessness and violence, he was undeniably gentle with his daughter. His patience seemed infinite as she knocked over her water glass, interrupted him mid-sentence, and asked the same question 3 different ways. "Sophia," he said when she began to fidget during the main course, "why don't you tell Sophia about your school project?" The little girl immediately launched into a detailed explanation of a science experiment involving plants growing in different conditions. I listened, asking questions and encouraging her, while acutely aware of Moretti's eyes on me, studying my interactions with his daughter with an intensity that made my skin prickle. When dessert arrived, an elaborate chocolate creation that made Sophia squeal with delight, Moretti finally steered the conversation in a new direction. "Sophia tells me you used to dance," he said, his tone conversational yet probing. "Ballet?" I nodded, surprised he'd remembered that detail from our brief exchange at the restaurant. "For about 6 years, until I was 12. "Why did you stop?" Sophia asked, echoing her question from before, chocolate smeared on her chin. This time, I couldn't deflect with a vague answer about adult choices. Something about the setting, perhaps the disarming presence of the child, or maybe the surreal intimacy of dining in this palace. loosened my usual guardedness. My father left, and my mother couldn't afford the lessons anymore, I said simply. She was working 2 jobs just to keep our apartment. Sophia's face fell. That's sad. Life isn't always fair, Tesoro, Moretti said, his eyes never leaving my face. But sometimes, what seems like an ending can be a beginning in disguise. There was something in his tone that suggested he wasn't just offering platitudes about my childhood disappointment. Before I could decipher his meaning, Sophia yawned widely. I think it's past someone's bedtime, Moretti observed, checking his watch. It's nearly 9. But I want to show Sophia my kittens, Sophia protested, though her eyelids were visibly drooping. Tomorrow is a school day, he reminded her gently. The kittens will still be here another time. Another time. The implication that this dinner wasn't a one-time event hung in the air between us. Sophia's lower lip trembled dangerously. But I promised Sophia, Moretti sighed, a sound of fond exasperation. 10 minutes with the kittens, then straight to bed without arguments. Deal? Sophia nodded eagerly, suddenly revitalized. She grabbed my hand and pulled me from my chair with surprising strength for such a small person. They're in the garden room. Come on. I glanced back at Moretti, who nodded his permission with the ghost of a smile. We'll have coffee when you return, he said, the statement both a promise and a command. Sophia led me through the house, her small hand warm in mine, chattering about her kittens' personalities and names. The garden room turned out to be a solarium at the back of the house, filled with lush plants and comfortable furniture. In one corner, a plush cat bed held 3 tiny kittens, all black, except for white markings on their paws and faces. This is Midnight, and this is Shadow, and this is Ghost, Sophia introduced them proudly. Papa got them for my birthday last month. They're brothers. I knelt beside the cat bed, gently stroking one of the kittens. It mewed softly and batted at my fingers with velvet paws. They're beautiful, I told her honestly. Sophia beamed, carefully picking up the smallest kitten and cradling it against her chest. This one's my favorite, but don't tell the others. Mama loved cats too. Papa says that's why she sent these to me for my birthday. I froze, my hand still on one of the kittens. Your mama sent them? Sophia nodded solemnly. Papa says Mama can't be here, but she sends me presents sometimes. For my birthday and Christmas. Do you think that's true? The innocent question pierced my heart. I glanced toward the doorway, half expecting to find Moretti listening, but we were alone. I think, I said carefully, that your papa wants you to know how much your mama loves you, even if she can't be here. Sophia considered this, her small face serious. I don't really remember her anymore. Just her smell, like flowers after rain. She yawned again, wider this time. Papa has a picture of her in his study, but I'm not allowed in there. Before I could respond to this revelation, Mrs. Russo appeared in the doorway. Miss Sophia, it's time for bed. You can see the kittens tomorrow after school. Sophia sighed dramatically but returned the kitten to its bed. Good night, babies, she whispered, then turned to me. Will you come to tuck me in, Sophia? The request startled me. I think that's something special for your papa to do, but you could both do it, she suggested, brightening at the idea. Mrs. Russo intervened smoothly. Your father is waiting for Miss Sophia in the study. Come along now. Let's get you ready for bed. Sophia hugged me impulsively, her small arms tight around my waist. Good night, Sophia. Will you come back soon? The question caught in my chest like a thorn. This child, so eager for female attention, had latched onto me, a stranger, with alarming speed. What did that say about her life in this beautiful, empty mansion? If your father invites me, I answered truthfully. Sophia smiled sleepily and took Mrs. Russo's outstretched hand. As they left, I remained kneeling by the kittens, trying to process everything I'd learned in the past few hours. A mother who was gone, but supposedly still sent presents. A photograph hidden away in a forbidden study. A child starved for maternal affection. And at the center of it all, Vincent Moretti, a man whose very name inspired fear throughout the city, yet who watched his daughter with genuine love in his eyes. What had happened to Sophia's mother? And why had Moretti really invited me into their closely guarded world? With a deep breath, I stood and prepared to face him alone. The house seemed to grow more imposing as I followed Mrs. Rousseau's directions to the study. Artwork that belonged in museums lined the hallways, dark Renaissance paintings and modern sculptures placed with careful precision. Everything spoke of wealth beyond my comprehension, and taste curated over generations. At the end of a long corridor, heavy double doors stood partially open, warm light spilling onto the polished hardwood floor. I paused before them, gathering my courage. Something told me that crossing this threshold would change everything, that whatever game Moretti was playing would advance to its next, inevitable phase. I knocked lightly on the doorframe. "Enter," came his voice from within. The study was smaller than I'd expected, but no less impressive. 3 walls of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves housed leather-bound volumes organized by some system I couldn't discern. A massive desk dominated one side of the room, its surface bare except for a laptop, a leather portfolio, and a crystal decanter. Before a fireplace were 2 leather armchairs and a small table where a silver coffee service waited. Moretti stood at the window behind his desk, silhouetted against the city lights spread below like fallen stars. He turned as I entered, and for a moment, I glimpsed something unexpected on his face, a weariness, a vulnerability quickly masked as he registered my presence. "Sophia is quite taken with you," he said, moving away from the window to gesture toward one of the armchairs. "Please sit." "Coffee?" I nodded, taking the seat furthest from him. "Yes, thank you." He poured 2 cups with practiced grace, handling the delicate china with surprising gentleness for a man rumored to be so dangerous. "Cream? Sugar? Black is fine," I replied, accepting the cup he offered. Our fingers brushed again, and again I felt that strange current between us, a recognition of something I couldn't name. Moretti took the chair opposite, studying me over the rim of his cup. "You're good with her. Patient. Most adults find Sophia's energy challenging. She's a wonderful child," I said honestly. "Bright and curious." "Yes." A shadow crossed his face. "She reminds me of her mother, the same restless spirit." It was the opening I'd been waiting for, though I knew I should tread carefully. Sophia mentioned her mother sent the kittens for her birthday. Moretti's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "A convenient fiction. Children need hope, even when truth offers none." She also mentioned a photograph, "in your study." I glanced around, not seeing any personal photos among the books and artwork. His jaw tightened. "You're very direct, Sophia." "Only when indirect doesn't seem to work," I countered, surprising myself with my boldness. For a moment, I thought I'd gone too far. His eyes, those whiskey-colored eyes that seemed to miss nothing, narrowed dangerously. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a short, rusty sound, as if it had been a long time since he'd had cause to use it. "Refreshing," he said, setting his coffee down. "Do you know how many people in this city would dare to question me about my personal life?" I swallowed hard. "I imagine very few." "None," he corrected, "except you. A waitress with more courage than sense." The description should have offended me, but there was something like admiration in his tone that diffused the insult. Still, I needed to establish boundaries before this strange conversation went any further. "Mr. Moretti—" "Vincent," he interrupted. "In my home, with my daughter introducing you to her kittens, I think we've moved beyond formalities." I hesitated, then nodded. "Vincent, I appreciate your hospitality, but I'm confused about why I'm here, why you've taken an interest in me. I'm nobody special." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intensifying. "That's where you're wrong, Sophia. From the moment you knelt beside my daughter and spoke to her about her mother with such understanding, I knew you were exceptional." "I just said what anyone would say to a child missing her mother," I protested. "No," he said firmly. "What you said came from experience. From knowing loss, from understanding the hole a mother's absence leaves behind." He paused, watching my reaction. "Am I wrong?" I looked away, uncomfortable with his perception. "My mother isn't dead. She's in Arizona. But she was absent when you needed her most," he said, not a question, but a statement. "When your father left, when you had to give up dancing," my head snapped up. "I never said she was absent. You didn't have to." Vincent rose and moved to a bookshelf behind his desk. He pressed something I couldn't see, and a section of the shelf slid aside, revealing a small wall safe. He entered a combination, opened it, and withdrew a silver frame. For a long moment, he looked down at whatever photograph it contained, his expression unreadable. Then he crossed to where I sat and handed it to me. The woman in the photo was breathtaking. Dark curls similar to Sophia's framed a heart-shaped face. Her smile was radiant, lighting up eyes the exact shade of her daughter's. She was captured mid-laugh on what appeared to be a yacht, the wind blowing her hair, her hand reaching toward whoever was taking the picture. Adelina, Vincent said, the name like a prayer on his lips. Sophia's mother, my wife. I traced the edge of the frame with my fingertip, struck by the joy in the woman's face. She's beautiful. Sophia has her smile. Yes? He reclaimed the photograph, his thumb brushing over the woman's face with tender reverence before returning it to the safe. That was taken 3 months before she disappeared. The word hung in the air between us. Not died. Disappeared. What happened to her? I asked quietly. Vincent returned to his chair, but his posture had changed, tension coiled beneath the surface of his controlled exterior. That depends on who you ask. The police believe she ran away with a considerable amount of my money and a man she'd been seeing. Her parents believe I killed her in a jealous rage. My enemies spread their own theories, each more lurid than the last. And what do you believe? I pressed, unable to stop myself. His eyes met mine, and in them I saw a pain so raw it took my breath away. I believe my wife was taken from us. And I believe whoever took her wanted to destroy me through her. The implication sent a chill down my spine. You think she's dead? I know she is, he said with grim certainty. Adelina would never willingly abandon Sophia. Never. I set my coffee cup down, my hands suddenly unsteady. I'm sorry, truly. But I still don't understand what this has to do with me. Vincent was silent for a long moment, studying me with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see through all my carefully constructed defenses. Sophia hasn't connected with any of her nannies or teachers. She tolerates her therapist but shares nothing meaningful. Then you, a waitress in a mediocre Italian restaurant, speak 5 sentences to her, and suddenly she's drawing pictures for you and introducing you to her kittens. He leaned forward, closing some of the distance between us. My daughter needs a maternal figure in her life, Sophia, and for whatever reason, she's chosen you. I stared at him, comprehension slowly dawning. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you an opportunity, he corrected, to finish your nursing degree without financial strain, to move out of that apartment with the broken heating and unreliable plumbing, to make a difference in the life of a child who needs you. My mind reeled. How did he know about my apartment's heating? The plumbing? What else had he investigated about my life? In exchange for what? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Your time. Your presence in this house. Your influence on my daughter. His eyes held mine. I'm not asking you to be her mother, Sophia. No one could replace Adelina, but Sophia needs someone, and she's chosen you. The offer hung between us, tempting and terrifying in equal measure. Financial security, the chance to finish my degree without working myself to exhaustion. A beautiful home. But the price. And if I refuse? I asked, needing to know what options remained. Something darkened in his expression. You would break a little girl's heart. Is that something you're prepared to do? The manipulation was so skillful I almost missed it. Almost. That's not fair. Very little in this world is fair, Sophia, he replied, his voice hardening. I learned that the night my wife vanished. Sophia learned it too young, and I suspect you've known it much of your life. I stood abruptly, needing distance from his intensity, from the gravitational pull he seemed to exert. I need to think about this. It's a lot to process. Vincent remained seated, watching me pace toward the fireplace. Of course. I wouldn't expect an immediate decision on something that would change your life so completely. I turned to face him, wrapping my arms around myself. How would this even work? Would I live here? Would I still work at Bellini's? What exactly are you asking of me? He rose then, moving to stand before me with fluid grace. Up close, I could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes. Evidence that beneath the power and danger, he was simply a man, albeit one who operated in a world I could barely comprehend. You would have your own suite of rooms in the East Wing. Private entrance, if you wish. A car at your disposal, full tuition for your nursing program, plus a stipend generous enough that working at that restaurant would become unnecessary. His voice softened slightly. In return, you would spend time with Sophia daily, help with her homework, attend her ballet recitals, be present at dinner most evenings. Essentially, you would become part of our household. And what about you? I asked, the question slipping out before I could consider its implications. His eyebrow arched. What about me, Sophia? Heat rushed to my cheeks. I meant, what would be expected regarding our interaction? A smile played at the corners of his mouth, knowing and dangerous. Nothing you don't freely offer. I'm not in the habit of coercing women, despite what rumors may suggest. Something in his tone made my pulse quicken. There was attraction there, undeniably. A current that had been present since that first night at the restaurant. But was it genuine, or simply another tool in his arsenal of manipulation? I should go, I said, suddenly feeling the walls closing in. It's getting late, and I have an early shift tomorrow. Vincent nodded, accepting my retreat with grace. My driver will take you home whenever you're ready. But first, he crossed to his desk and retrieved a small card from a drawer. My private number. When you've made your decision, call me directly, not through the restaurant or any intermediary. I took the card, our fingers brushing once more. This time, he deliberately prolonged the contact, his thumb tracing a small circle on the inside of my wrist. The intimacy of the gesture sent a shiver through me that I couldn't disguise. 1 week, Sophia, he said quietly. I'll give you that long to decide. After that, I'll need to make other arrangements for Sophia. Another deadline, another pressure point applied with expert precision. I slipped the card into my purse without looking at it, knowing I would obsess over this decision for every minute of the 7 days he'd granted me. I understand, I said, moving toward the door. Thank you for dinner, and please tell Sophia I enjoyed meeting her kittens. Vincent followed me to the door, reaching past me to open it. The movement brought him close enough that I could feel the heat of his body, smell the subtle cologne that seemed an intrinsic part of him now in my mind. You surprise me, Sophia, he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. Most people in your position would have jumped at this opportunity without a second thought. I met his gaze directly. Maybe I'm not most people. Something like approval flickered in his eyes. No, you're certainly not. The drive back to my apartment was a blur of conflicting emotions. Dante remained silent in the front seat, though occasionally I caught him watching me in the rearview mirror, his expression unreadable. When we finally pulled up outside my building, he got out to open my door, then handed me a sleek black phone I'd never seen before. Mr. Moretti thought you might need this, he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. It's secure. His number is the only one programmed in it. I stared at the device in my palm. I have a phone. Dante's scarred face remained impassive. This one won't be monitored by anyone else. The implication sent a chill through me. My regular phone might be compromised. Who would be listening? The police? Moretti's enemies? Moretti himself? Thank you, I said finally, slipping the phone into my purse alongside the card with his number. Dante nodded once. He doesn't extend these invitations lightly, miss. Not anymore. Not since Mrs. Moretti. Before I could respond to this unexpected confidence, he returned to the car and drove away, leaving me standing on the cracked sidewalk outside my building, clutching my purse with its dangerous new contents. Inside my apartment, I kicked off my heels and sank onto my worn couch, mind racing. The evening replayed in fragments. Sophia's eager face as she introduced me to her kittens, the photograph of Adelina, radiant and alive. Vincent's eyes as he spoke of his wife's disappearance, grief and rage so tightly controlled they seemed to vibrate beneath his skin. And beneath it all, a current of attraction I couldn't deny, couldn't rationalize away as mere manipulation or Stockholm syndrome. I withdrew the black phone from my purse and stared at it. One button would connect me directly to Vincent Moretti, a man who, by his own oblique admission, operated outside the law. A man whose wife had vanished under circumstances mysterious enough that multiple theories circulated about her fate. A man who had researched my life thoroughly enough to know about my building's faulty heating. A man who was offering me everything I'd ever wanted, wrapped in silk and tied with strings I couldn't yet see. I set the phone on my coffee table and stared at it, feeling as though I stood at a crossroads. One path leading back to my struggling but simple life, the other into darkness I couldn't begin to fathom. 7 days to decide, 7 days to determine whether I was willing to step into Vincent Moretti's world, knowing I might never find my way out again. For 6 days, I carried both phones everywhere, my old one for normal life, the black one a constant, heavy presence in my purse. I worked my shifts at Bellini's, attended my nursing classes, and went through the motions of my regular life, while my mind remained firmly ensnared in the Moretti mansion on the hill. Lena noticed my distraction during our shared shift on Thursday. "Earth to Sophia," she said, snapping her fingers before my face as I stared blankly at the espresso machine. "What's going on with you? You've been a zombie all week." I forced a smile. "Just tired. Finals coming up." She studied me, unconvinced. "This wouldn't have anything to do with a certain dinner you had on Sunday, would it?" News traveled fast in our small world. "How did you—" "Marco saw Moretti's car pick you up." She lowered her voice. "Sophia, what are you doing? Getting involved with someone like him is dangerous." "It's not like that," I protested. "It's about his daughter." Lena's eyebrows shot up. "His daughter? The one whose mother mysteriously vanished?" The way she emphasized mysteriously made my stomach clench. "You don't think he—" "I don't think anything," she interrupted. "And neither should you. Whatever he's offering you, it's not worth it. Men like that don't give without taking something much bigger in return." Her words echoed in my mind that night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow was the deadline Vincent had set. 7 days to decide whether to step into his world or remain firmly in my own. I reached for the black phone on my nightstand, its sleek surface cool against my palm. I'd turned it on daily, waiting for something. A message? A call? But it had remained silent, respecting the space for decision-making he'd promised. Just before midnight, it vibrated in my hand, startling me so badly I nearly dropped it. A text message appeared on the screen. "Have you decided?" 3 words. No signature needed. My heart raced as I stared at them, knowing he was somewhere in his mansion, perhaps in that study with its hidden photograph, waiting for my response. I typed and deleted 5 different replies before settling on simple honesty. "I'm afraid." The response came almost immediately. Of me, I considered the question carefully. Was I afraid of Vincent Moretti himself? Of the world he inhabited? Or was I more afraid of the part of myself that had been drawn to him from that first night? The part that responded to his intensity with a matching fire of my own? Of everything this would mean for both of us. The typing indicator appeared and disappeared several times, as if he too was struggling to find the right words. Finally, "My car will be outside your building at 10 a.m. tomorrow. If you're in it, we'll discuss terms that address your concerns. If not, we'll never speak of this again." The ultimatum hung in the digital space between us. I set the phone down without responding, knowing he didn't expect one. Vincent Moretti was a man accustomed to making offers that were either accepted completely or rejected outright. No negotiation, no middle ground. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned, playing out scenarios in my mind. What if I said yes? What if I said no? What would become of Sophia if I refused? What would become of me if I accepted? Dawn broke without answers, pale light filtering through my thin curtains. I showered and dressed mechanically, choosing a simple blue sweater and jeans, clothes that belonged to my world, not his. If I was going to cross this threshold, I would do it as myself, not as someone playing a part. At 9:55, I stood at my window looking down at the street. The black SUV was already there, Dante leaning against its side, smoking a cigarette. 5 minutes early, just like the night of the dinner, punctuality as a form of control. I picked up both phones, hesitating over which to bring. After a moment's consideration, I tucked both into my purse. Whatever I decided, I wouldn't abandon my old life completely. Not yet. The air outside was crisp, autumn finally asserting itself after a lingering summer. Dante straightened as I approached, extinguishing his cigarette under his heel. "Miss Sophia." He greeted me, no surprise in his voice. Had he been so certain I would come? "I haven't decided yet," I said, needing to establish that fact immediately. "I'm just talking, negotiating." A flicker of something, amusement, respect, crossed his scarred face. "Mr. Moretti doesn't typically negotiate." "Then this will be new for him," I replied, a boldness in my voice I didn't entirely feel. Dante opened the car door, and I slid into the back seat, expecting to find it empty as before. Instead, Vincent Moretti himself sat there, impeccable in a gray suit, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that stole my breath. "Sophia," he said, my name a caress in his accented voice. "You came." "To talk," I clarified, suddenly hyper-aware of the confined space we shared. "I haven't agreed to anything," Vincent nodded, "accepting this boundary. Of course. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address your concerns." As the car pulled away from my building, I noticed we weren't heading toward the hills and his mansion. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere neutral," he replied. "I thought it might make you more comfortable." The consideration surprised me. We rode in silence for several minutes, the city passing by outside the tinted windows. Finally, the car stopped at a small park overlooking the harbor, one I recognized as being recently renovated after years of neglect. "Shall we walk?" Vincent suggested, gesturing toward a winding path that followed the waterfront. I nodded, and Dante opened my door. As we stepped onto the path, I noticed him following at a discreet distance, his vigilant eyes scanning our surroundings constantly. "This park was abandoned for decades," Vincent said as we walked. "A waste of prime real estate and a beautiful view, until the mysterious donor funded its renovation," I finished. The project had been in the local news, an anonymous benefactor providing millions to transform the neglected space into a community oasis. Vincent smiled slightly, not so mysterious to some. "It was you," I realized. "Why anonymously?" He shrugged, an elegant movement of his shoulders. "Not everything needs to have my name attached to it. Some good works are better done quietly." We reached a secluded bench overlooking the water. Vincent gestured for me to sit, then joined me, maintaining a respectful distance between us. "Your concerns, Sophia, tell me." I took a deep breath, organizing my thoughts. First, what exactly would my role be with Sophia? I'm not a nanny or a teacher or a therapist. "You would be her friend," he said simply. "A female presence she trusts. Someone who can help her navigate the challenges of growing up without a mother." He paused, his gaze shifting to the harbor. "Sophia has wealth, privilege, protection, everything except what she needs most." "A mother's love," I finished softly. "Something approximating it," he corrected. "I've been clear from the beginning. I don't expect you to replace Adelina. That would be impossible and unfair to ask." I nodded, understanding the distinction. "And my nursing degree? Fully funded, including any advanced certifications you might wish to pursue afterward. Your academic schedule would take priority over your responsibilities to Sophia." The generosity of the offer was overwhelming. "Why me? Surely there are people better qualified." "Sophia chose you," he interrupted. "Children have instincts adults often lack. She saw something in you that she needs." His eyes met mine. As did I. Heat bloomed in my cheeks at the implication. "And that brings me to my most important question. What do you expect from me, Vincent, beyond my relationship with Sophia?" He was silent for a long moment, his gaze intense but unreadable. "Honesty, loyalty, discretion." He leaned slightly closer. "What happens between us beyond that would be a matter of mutual desire, not obligation or expectation." My heart raced at his proximity, at the undercurrent in his words. "Your world is dangerous. I'd be putting myself at risk just by association." "Yes," he admitted without hesitation. "I won't insult your intelligence by pretending otherwise. My business activities are complex. But within my home, within my protection, you would be safe. From everyone except you, I said quietly. Something flashed in his eyes, hurt, perhaps, or anger at the implication. I have never harmed a woman in my life, Sophia, despite what rumors may suggest. And Adelina? I asked, the question I'd been holding back all week finally emerging. What really happened to her? Vincent's jaw tightened, pain etching itself into the lines of his face. She was taken by the Donato family. A message to me about territorial disputes. His voice dropped to a near whisper. By the time I found her, it was too late. The raw grief in his voice couldn't be manufactured. Whatever had happened to his wife, the loss had scarred him deeply. I'm sorry, I said softly, instinctively reaching out to cover his hand with mine. The touch seemed to surprise both of us. For a moment we sat in silence, my smaller hand resting atop his larger one, the connection between us undeniable and frightening in its intensity. If I agree, I said finally, withdrawing my hand, I would need certain guarantees. My independence, my freedom to leave if things become complicated, protection from your enemies and your business. Vincent nodded slowly. All reasonable requests. I can provide written assurances if you wish. I almost laughed at the absurdity. What good would a contract be with a man who operated outside the law? Yet the offer itself showed respect for my concerns. I don't need papers, I said. I need your word. As Sophia's father, something shifted in his expression. Approval, perhaps, that I'd found the one aspect of his identity he held sacred. You have it. On my daughter's happiness, I swear you will be free to leave at any time, with financial security intact, should you choose to do so. The breeze off the water carried the scent of salt and possibility. Behind us, Dante maintained his vigilant watch. Before us stretched the harbor, ships coming and going, some to places near, others to destinations unknown. 1 month, I said finally. I'll commit to 1 month, a trial period for all of us. If it works for Sophia, for you, for me, then we can discuss a longer arrangement. Vincent's eyes brightened with something that might have been hope. Agreed. Must. He extended his hand, and I took it, a formal handshake to seal an agreement that was anything but ordinary. His fingers closed around mine, warm and strong, and I knew in that moment that my life had irrevocably changed course. When would you like me to start? I asked. Our hands still joined between us. Vincent smiled. A real smile that transformed his severe features into something startlingly handsome. Sophia has a ballet recital tomorrow afternoon. I think she would be very happy to see you in the audience. As we walked back to the car, the morning sun warmed my face. Behind us, our footprints left parallel tracks in the damp earth of the path, separate but aligned, heading in the same direction. For better or worse, I had stepped into Vincent Moretti's world. What awaited me there, danger or redemption, heartbreak or healing, remained to be seen. But for the first time in years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. The electric thrill of possibility, of a future unwritten but full of promise. A future that somehow, improbably, now included a dangerous man with whiskey-colored eyes and the little girl who had claimed my heart with 5 simple words. She just wants to be loved.